The Utah Utes are one of the most dominant college football teams in the country, and one of the biggest reasons for their dominance is flying under the radar.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thank you for those of you who do make us your first listen and view of the day. Great, huge shout out to our everydayers. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app you can download today. My name is JT WISTRCILL, excited to be joined by one of the best football minds in the state of Utah, BRYAN Brown, an analyst for KSL Sports Rewind. We're going to talk about some high school sports, including the catch hurled around not just the U.S., but the world that happened in WISTRCILL Stadium last week. Some Utah recruiting, preview this Kansas State team a little bit. But Bryan, this Utah Utes team has just been a dominant force on the season. I mean, literally, they're 35 points per game that they're winning by. There's the best margin in the country currently right now. They're dominant offensively and defensively. They are one of just 4 schools in the top 10 of scoring offense and defense. And I think when you talk about this Utah team's dominance, we started to talk a little bit about the offensive line. Like, we see what the players are doing on the field. But I think the one thing that's really going unnoticed, Bryan, is that Utah, I genuinely think for what they've produced this season, they arguably have 2 top 10 coordinators on both sides of the ball. The job that each of these coordinators, Morgan Scalley on the defensive side, Jason Beck on the offensive, has just been incredible work.
It really has been, and I think it's a testament to what KYLE Whittingham has done in building the University of Utah football program over the last 20 some odd years that he's been there. And it's also a testament to what you can do when you get the right people in the right spots and focus on what you can accomplish rather than getting bogged down on what you're not accomplishing. Because I don't think this is a perfect football roster by any stretch. I don't think this is a perfect football team. If you were to ask me where Utah measures up in terms of national talent, I think it would be towards the bottom of the college football playoff rankings, not towards the top where they're at in terms of just sheer talent. And we've talked, you and I have talked, and I've talked a lot about the blue chip ratio. This is not a team that crosses that ratio. Shout out to the great Bud Elliott for that one. But they are doing what Utah has always done, which is maximizing their talent and being the best at what they do well. And that really right now is playing stifling defense and running the football.
Yeah, and they're running the football so well. They're the second best team in a rushing yards per game basis, only behind Navy. Like, so now Utah, last week you talked about like it was only them in service schools in the top 4. Now Utah's above even some of those service schools. It shows you just how well this team is running the ball right now. And that is the key to Jason Beck's offense, Bryan. But this offense has just been incredible. I mean, let's not forget last year, Utah had like 7 rushing touchdowns on the season. Like, it's crazy how quickly we forget the massive leap forward this Utah football team has made. And it's an offense right now that is firing, I mean, so well on all cylinders that this Utah team is just, they are outscoring everyone, like, just by the widest of margins. I mean, it's 264-97. Utah's outscoring their opponents in their last 6 games. We'll get to why that number is under 100 in those last 6 games. Let's start by why it's over and nearly at, well, it's over 245. What about Jason Beck's offense is giving defensive teams and just defensive coaches just headaches, Bryan?
I think it's diversity in the run game. I think you're seeing he lives by the same Mike Leach philosophy that a lot of offensive coordinators do, which the more guys you get touching the football, the better it is. And you're seeing that in how they get guys the football. This would be the point if we're on ESPN where the highlight package would come on and you'd see a handoff at the middle to WAYSHAWN PARKER, then you'd see a jet sweep to Daniel BRAY, and then you would see Bert Ficklin doing a zone read style handoff with DEVON DAMPIER and everything else that they've done to make the run game very versatile. And I think what that's done is, rather than just forcing your offensive linemen to be elite and beat their guy every single time one-on-one, they've put some we'll put the fear of Lombardi in the defenses that they're playing against, in the sense of they can't just assume what's going to happen and depend on hat on hat or physicality on physicality to win games. They're using some strategic and schematic advantages to really open up the run game, and I think it's really benefited this offensive line. You know, Spencer Fano said, and I believe it was in Big 12 media days, and maybe he said this with you as well, is that this offense is fun. Yeah. And if you're an offensive lineman, it's really great to have fun in the run game, and I think you're seeing the production of that. And again, a huge credit to Jason Beck because he's using all of his personnel, right? It's not just Devon Dampier, it's not just WAYSHAWN Parker, it's Bird Ficklin stepping up when they need him to, and it's, he had that package ready to go and prepared even if Devon got hurt. So that's another credit to him. And I think, I want to say it was you and I were talking about this. He may not have been the best candidate. He was the absolute best candidate and the best fit for Utah, hands down.
Oh, I 1000% agree too, Brian. But I'll also ask you this, like why, we see motion. Everyone uses motion, but not everyone uses 6 offensive linemen. Just there's like things that Utah is doing, like something like a 6 offensive lineman is unique to a Utah, but everyone uses motion. What is it about the way that Jason Beck uses motion that makes it so hard for these teams to defend? And it just feels like each week Utah is just throttling these teams, even in a week like last week where they don't even throw for 100 yards.
It's all about getting the player the football with an advantage, right? And you talk about using 6 offensive linemen. I think most teams don't have a Toa Moya that they can throw in at tight end, number 49, or a Semitau Longa that they can throw in the backfield. And, he's a guy that came in as a defensive lineman, and now he may end up in the NFL as a fullback. The level to which Semitau Longa has influenced the run game in the state of Utah is incredible. There's a clip of me on the internet losing my mind because Sam Tauvau, a sophomore from Brighton High School, ran in a touchdown in that same similar formation. And I don't know if that's the Rhino or the Gorilla package that Semi's in on, but I think, again, it is all this stuff is being used to get your player the ball with an advantage, not just forcing them to win the matchup every single time. And, motion can be for a variety of different reasons, right? I think with Daniel Bray, you're getting him the ball going full speed. And when he's going full speed, he has this ability to almost stop on a dime and cut up field still and regenerate that inertia so quickly that you want to use him going sideline to sideline and really stretch those defenses. And, I'll take a second to respond to some of the haters, if we will, the criticizers that were really upset the way that Utah goes sideline to sideline in the first quarter. I think it turned out okay. They ran for 380 yards, so maybe Jason Beck had something in mind in what he wanted to do with all that, and giving it all out right there in the very first quarter probably wasn't part of the game plan. And so again, you talking about the motions, we could get into the specifics of it, like are they using an orbit motion? Is it a jet sweep motion? Things of that nature. I'm probably not the best one to diagnose exactly how it's done, but I can tell you it's all done with an effort to create space and get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in a way that they can have an advantage. And I think that's really where Jason Beck has been elite this year.
Yeah, and like you said, identifying those mismatches too, like where's the weak point here? He does such a good job of that. We are enamored and excited about what Jason Beck is doing right now with this Utah offense because it's new, and we just had such a bad offense last year too. Like Utah fans, we did, like it was so bad. It makes sense that we're so focused on what Jason Beck's doing, but it's easy to overlook just how dominant the Morgan Scalley-led Utah defense is currently right now. Utah holding teams to just 15 points per game. I mentioned the top 10 is scoring offense and defense. Brian, what has allowed this Morgan Scalley defense to? I mean, honestly, right now they're better than they were last year, and we'll see if that holds through these last few games, but I didn't think that was going to be the case. Like, what has made this defense so effective this year?
I think it's a lot of growth up front on the defensive line. You've lost guys to injury and still been able to plug and play, and that's a credit to Luther Ellis and Lewis Powell, who have done a great job. I think you look at what Cash Dillon was able to do, and you almost don't even notice sometimes when John Henry Daly's out. How is that even possible with a guy who has as many sacks as he does? I don't know if he's still leading the country or not. I believe it's close, right? Like he's still, still elite, but the book is out on JHD, and he can swing his axe around as much as he wants. There's a lot of timber that they're putting in front of him that's making it hard to get there, but it's not limiting the ability that Utah's had to put pressure on guys. And they've also had players step up that I think in the face of losing guys to injury that maybe we didn't expect. Jackson Benny has been fantastic all year long. Smith Snowden doesn't get enough credit for being so versatile. He plays all over the field. Sometimes he's lining up at safety, sometimes it's corner, sometimes it's nickel, and he very rarely loses a matchup. We talked about the one pass that he gave up to Cincinnati, and oh goodness, they threw an absolutely perfect pass, and he didn't have enough juice to defend that one. So You talk about what it is. It's a mixture of Morgan Scalley using his personnel to their advantage, putting guys in places to succeed. You know, we've seen less of Jackson Benny on offense, but it really hasn't made a huge difference because they've needed him on defense, and he's been great over there. I think it's an emergence of a secondary, and again, apologies to Blake Cotton. When I said Bryce, I was thinking the former Jazz player from years back.
Yeah, that's right.
But Blake Cotton has been fantastic in his evolution, and I think you saw it again where you know, like Thompson came in for a few plays and played well. Dom Saunders is playing extremely well, and you know, Elijah Davis had a tough game Saturday night. I think that everybody could see that, but you know, he's been pretty good for the most part the rest of the year.
Still in that game,
yeah, you know, and so I think it's a lot of credit to that aspect of it. I think it's some good adaptation on the part of Morgan Scalley in terms of they may not be tackling as well, but they're still defending at an elite level, and I think it's fascinating because Utah fans are they're such savages, like, and I say that in a loving way, but this is just a fan base that is football obsessed, and so they can tell when teams aren't tackling on a normal rate, consistent with the Utah standard, I should say, and I'm kind of just like shrugging my shoulders, like, well, we tackle like an average college football team for once, you know.
yeah.
But even then, I think it's their ability to develop guys and see diamonds in the rough. You know, John Henry Daly went to BYU, and you know, I'd heard that he did nothing down there, and he comes to Utah, and you know, they're bought in on him, and he feels that love. He goes to the coaching staff and goes to Morgan Scalley, says, "What I need to do better to get better, coach." And Scalley's like, "Go to yoga," you know, and all of a sudden he's an elite pass rusher. So I think you know, it's a culmination of a lot of things, but also Scalley is just super dialed in, and I want to reemphasize here that this is all, you know, the building and the structuring of the architect KYLE Whittingham, because it's his defense, and you know, I made the comment that Morgan Scalley was in his bag about, you know, putting hands up in passing lanes, and had someone reach out to me and say that was actually from the head ball coach that came up with that idea. But again, it's how it's implemented, right? And Scalley is that's not to take any credit away from Morgan and what he's coming up with every single week, because his pressure packages are just insane. But I think they are doing exactly what they need to do week in, week out to win. I mean, they gave up 500-ish yards of offense to Baylor, but it was turnovers. You know, they knew that they could get turnovers, and they knew if they could get Sawyer Robertson throwing off his back foot that he'd miss a lot of those goal balls, and it paid off.
It absolutely did pay off for this Utah team, and they're balling. And you make a great point too. Like, you know, we're giving the coordinators credits right now. KYLE Whittingham still doing his thing. He'd be frustrated with him after a BYU loss. Sure, he made some decisions that we wish he didn't, but he has helped this team, and his ability to keep this team relevant when so many of his peers in the coaching world are tapering off. It's a huge credit to him and what he's done. And Utah obviously looking to finish strong this year and continue to be a strong recruiting team too. And a Utah commit turned quite a lot of heads last week. We got to talk about the play that captivated a nation in one moment. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You can head to FanDuel.com today and sign up to play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And it's not just the NBA, NHL, NFL, college basketball. We got it all over at FanDuel. College football, of course. And speaking of college football, Utah Utes, pretty big favorites over Kansas State, 16.5 points. Honestly, part of me is like, man, that is a lot. But at the same time, Kansas State is having a rough year. They've got to win one of these final two games just to get bowl eligible still. So I like this Utah team, and they're blowing everyone else out. So they very well might do it again. But however you're feeling this game, you can head over to FanDuel Sportsbook today. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Woodward. We're just going to say it. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from the Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment. With facilities for all abilities, the door is always open to first timers and regulars alike. Bounce from park to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. Mountain Park season passes are now on sale for just $499. Rip hot laps with a posse after school and into the evening. Maximize mountain time this winter at one of the best terrain parks in Utah all season long. Looking to go all in? The All Access membership provides just that, from passes to perks, discounts, and more. Just starting out, learn to fly with the Woodward Tribe in seasonal and multi-week programs that build skills and confidence in a stoke-inspiring environment. Just 20 minutes from Salt Lake, Woodward offers experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more at woodwardparkcity.com today. We're going to talk about the catch heard around the world in a moment, but Brian, really quick, one last question on this Utah defense. What makes a Morgan Scalley blitz so hard to defend? Week after week, I see quarterbacks get walloped, and I see offensive linemen or running backs looking back being like, wait, was I supposed to pick him up? Were you supposed to pick him up? Why is a Morgan Scalley blitz so hard to contain?
I forget what the name of Legend of Bagger Vance is, the name of the golf movie, and it's Will Smith, Matt Damon. This is really dating me because I think the movie's like 15, 20 years old, but there's a point where he talks about Juna, aka Matt Damon's character, seeing the field, and there's all this like magical sounding music, and like you see this whoosh and this whoosh, and like he zooms down the course and sees the hole and steps back and hits it. It's like this perfect shot, and that's really what Morgan Scalley's doing, is he's seeing the field on a different level. I think it's always been his film study has been elite. His ability to diagnose and dissect defenses, the way he uses his safeties and his secondary as pressure players, and they have a specific blitz package that they love where they like to drop the defensive end into the hook area of defense, and I think it's one of those things where you can watch it on film, but it looks different and it seems different every single week with how they're adapting to offenses, and it's special, and I think it's one of those things that when you look at the University of Utah and where they're going forward, you have to really weigh, can you afford to lose something like that, depending on what happens with the head coach position.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, that's how I feel about it. Morgan is a special, and there are so many current coaches, by the way, who started out as coordinators and then got that opportunity at Dan Lanning, Ryan Day, just on both sides of the ball. Like, they were coordinated to Kirby Smart, coordinators first. They weren't G5 coaches who then became head coaches. There's a lot of really smart coordinators that just because they haven't been head coach yet doesn't mean they aren't going to soar. And it feels like that's going to be the case when Morgan Scalley gets his opportunity. Speaking of soaring, oh my goodness, Brian, you were on the sideline last week for the catch made by KENNAN PULA that had Sports Center and everyone's jaw on the floor. Walk me through your vantage point of the play heard across the sports world.
Well, I had actually gone up to the press box for the second half of that game and spent most of the game on the sideline, so it was a little bit different in the sense of, like, I literally saw it from a bird's eye view, and even from that far above, it was just one of those plays like, wait, what just happened? Mm-hmm. And everyone around, just the reactions, you couldn't help but just be in shock and awe from a play like that, mostly because you don't expect that kind of athleticism, in the sense of, like, you don't expect a high school player to have that kind of ability. You definitely don't expect a defender to have that kind of ability, and absolutely don't see a high school defender having that kind of ability. And I think KYLE Whittingham said it best. It's one of the best plays that he's ever seen.
I totally agree. Just leaping up middle of the field, making an unreal interception. And he is a current Utah Utes commit, and he got on Sports Center. Like, he's just had a ton of interviews and press for him, which is just awesome. And it's great to see a Utah commit getting that much love, because there are, surprisingly, Brian, only 4 commits from the state of Utah that are committed to currently go to the University of Utah. And one of them we just mentioned, KENNAN PULA, technically, according to 24/7 Sports, is not even the best player in his own family. Jaron Pula is currently a 4-star wide receiver, rated a little bit higher than him. But you got the Pula twins, you got Benjamin from Lehigh as well, you got Galia, the Orem cornerback as well too. There's only 4 of them right now, but what do you make of the kids from Utah who are committed to the University of Utah in this class?
I think Utah's done a good job of rescuing. We'll call it a rescue mission because that's really what it's been. Is they've had to rescue the in-state class, and I think Matali Benjamin, Lee Benjamin, as he's more colloquially, not even going to try it, as he's more well known amongst the high school community. He is a good long-term prospect, but you also have I call him the transporter, the transformer, Kelvin Obot in that class. And so when you have a 5-star tackle and a 3-star, that's a good place to be in, right? Because you can push your 5-star a little bit further up, and you can save Lee Benjamin to develop down the road. And I think Keith Olson's getting a lot of time for the University of Utah up front, and I mentioned Toa Moiai. So those guys are getting development, so he's going to get development. And I actually think that the offensive line situation is in a lot better straits than people maybe believe for next year. We'll see. You do have to replace 5 starters. That's a lot. But I also think that a lot of the guys that are playing now and a lot of guys that are going to see action moving forward can be really good as well. That being said, they are losing the in-state battle. And I don't think there's any way to overlook that. BYU is winning, and there's a lot of in-state kids that Utah's overlooked. I've campaigned pretty hard for Traden Bessinger over the last few months, and he's going to Iowa. And I get it because he is not the prototypical quarterback in terms of what Utah's been recruiting, right? He doesn't look like Bird Ficklin or Devon Dampier. He's not an absolute weapon in the run game, but I'll save my spiel, but I think that's one of those guys that I am curious how a guy that talented and that good leaves the state of Utah without even an offer from the flagship university. That being said, I think the Pula twins are legit. That's got to be the crown jewel of this class. If you can steer them through the finish, and look, it's awesome that Kennan's getting all this attention. It's well deserved. There are a lot of people that believe that he's better as a safety than he is as a wide receiver. I think there is a legitimate sibling rivalry between the two of them that leads to him playing wide receiver a little bit. And if you could leverage that, maybe you get more highlight plays for him. From him in Rice-Eccles Stadium, but you have to make sure that you land those two as part of the class. When I watch them as wide receivers, I'm not saying that this is the exact comp, but I see Puka Nacua and the similarities there in terms of the ability to make highlight plays, move the chains, all that kind of stuff. So you have to land those two. Just end of story. And I think that Utah's dedicated to that. I really like Scalley. He does a lot of various things for Orem. He runs the football. He plays defensively in a lot of different places. I think he's probably a safety for the University of Utah in terms of fit, and I think he's a good fit in that regard. You look at what Alakai Gilman was able to do and some of the other great safeties. He fits into that mold really well. But I think Utah still has to fill out this class, and I think they really do need to find a way to, if they're not going to make any waves at the end with the 2026 class locally, they really need to dedicate themselves to 2027.
Well, how about still some local guys in 26, Brian? This is the last week of high school football in the state of Utah. Big sad for both of us. But there are tons of guys who have been flying under the radar all season long, who are a couple of the guys that Utah could scoop up. You mentioned earlier, right? This isn't the most talented Utah football team, but they get the most out of their recruiting and development. Who are some of the guys in the state right now that are being overlooked nationally that the Utah Utes need to bring on in and hope maybe they can become one of the next star players on this Utah team that hopefully helps them overcome whatever 4 and 5 stars are on the other side of the field?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're talking about is you're not just building depth in terms of rostering guys who can start, but you're also building depth in terms of guys who come in and practice hard and play hard and can give your team a look, right? I think that's part of development and part of what makes them great, and some guys that I think that can really do that for the University of Utah and within a couple of years could be starters. Jagger Nieves from San Juan is one of those guys that immediately pops to mind, and he's a big bruising running back, but we have this weird schism, I think, towards running backs from the state of Utah, where listen. I'm not going to say that Jagger's on the same level as WAYSHAWN Parker. WAYSHAWN Parker's an NFL guy. There's just no doubt about it. But he's really, really good. And I think he's a guy that could give you a look. And 2A players, 3A players are kind of one of those things where people get a little bit nervous. But there was a guy a few years back that I wondered if maybe he could make an impact at the next level, and kind of honked my horn a little bit and said, hey, man, this kid, Delta High School, he's pretty good. Maybe he could be a safety. And boy, was I wrong on that, because he's a great quarterback, and that's Bryson Barnes. So,
Yeah.
Jagger Nieves is a guy that I really look at. I think a guy that really is flying incredibly under the radar for everybody is Jesse Simmons from Woods Cross. And part of that is because he's an option quarterback. He is huge. He's like 6'3", 210, and he's legit that size. He runs like a deer. Very, very rarely is he ever tackled in the open field, and he has an arm like you wouldn't believe. Now, granted, he's an option quarterback, so the fact that he's averaging 27 yards per completion gets downplayed by the fact that he's only completing like 7 passes a game. But that entire Woods Cross roster has some guys that I would be like, hey, come look at these guys, because I think they're one of those football teams that goes under the radar because they do run triple option. But Jesse Simmons is a legit tight end at the next level, 100%, hands down. Like, you guys think that Hunter Andrews is great, Jesse Simmons could be every single bit that player. So he's a guy that I always point at. There's a slew of guys that Utah could go after. There's a corner at Corner Canyon, which, how repetitive does that sound? That they should definitely take a look at. That's escaping my mind right now. Zay Morris is a wide receiver from Corner Canyon that's only played in a couple games this year, but he's been extremely good in those few games and put up some massive numbers. Kai Meza flipped his commitment to Cal. That was a tough thing to see, because I think Kai Meza could have been one of those guys for Utah that could come in and be, a Ryan Davis type receiver. And that's, that's the part about the state of Utah, is it doesn't have the elite wide receiver talent. You don't have Pulas on every single roster. But there are guys out there that you can definitely go after and get that can get the job done. Yeah, Joaquin Rodriguez is the name of the corner at Corner Canyon. We'll say defensive back, just because I'm already having a hard enough time talking tonight. But yeah, there's a lot of those kinds of guys, and I mean, I could go for hours about all the guys in state, but Jagger and Jesse Simmons are two guys that I really wanted to talk about, because I think they've been outstanding. Trip Palmer is another guy at San Juan that could be a really good player. Zachary Oxborough is another one. There's a wide receiver at Springville that is now Edwards, I believe is his name, and he's outstanding too. So it's just like I said, there's a lot of talent in state that Utah can go after, and they've done it in years past and done a pretty dang good job. I mean, Jackson Benny was not on anybody's radar for a very long time, and I think that's worked out for everybody involved.
It has worked out for everyone involved. There are a lot of elite level players in this class that are ranked and high up there, and you mentioned a lot of them going to BYU, unfortunately, too, but there are tons of under the radar guys, as there are every year in the state, that end up making a big difference when they get to the next level. So Utah needs to find those guys, and eventually someday those guys will have matchups with Kansas State. But for now, this current Utah Utes roster will be taking on the Wildcats this weekend. And Brian, I cannot still believe what has happened with this Kansas State team. The fact that they are 5-5. I thought this team was going to be one of the 4 best in the Big 12 this year. I thought Avery Johnson was going to make a leap, maybe be in the Heisman conversation at this point, and it just not has come to fruition. I think the Matt Wells, the offensive coordinator thing, it's been a bumpy there with everything going on. You look just offensively, I don't think their offensive line's outstanding. I think they're fine. They've had injuries at running back. Defensively, they're just not a great unit. They really just have lost to a lot of the best teams they've played on the season. So I'm very underwhelmed by them. I totally see why Utah is a 16.5 point favorite at home going into this game. Feels like two teams and programs heading in opposite directions. What do you see when you turn on the Kansas State tape and looking at this roster?
Yeah, you mentioned under the radar guys that could eventually play against Kansas State. I meant to say that Zachary Henderson, not Zachary Edwards for Springville, but he's the kind of guy that would provide that kind of continuity that Kansas State is lacking right now. And I think that's a lot of the problem that they've had is, the things that they were great at in the past, running the football, having really stout offensive linemen, are lacking for this year's team. The defense just really hasn't been up to the challenge like they have been in years past. Avery Johnson is a very talented athlete. They tried to make him into a quarterback, and that didn't go so well early on. And as they adapted and got him back into just being an athlete playing quarterback, I think that helped a lot. And it's It's one of those things where you're trying so hard to develop these guys, and guys just don't develop on a schedule all the time. And so, with that being said, I think this is a program that's at a little bit of a turning point. And you mentioned, like, what are they going to do on Saturday? I have no idea. Right, like they could very well be the dog that gets pushed up against the wall and comes out and attacks. This may be a team that is really eager to go and make a bowl game, or it could be a program that maybe, like Utah last year, just needs a reset and needs a chance to kind of clear the deck. I would tell fans, be a little bit wary judging too much based off of that game at Oklahoma State last week. That's a team and a staff at Oklahoma State that are literally fighting for their jobs right now, and there's a lot going on. So I think they put forth a better effort than maybe people would have expected. That being said, Kansas State's kind of I don't want to say fart in a whirlwind, but it's just like that's kind of the problem that they're having right now is they don't have an identity really as an offensive football team, and it's showing up.
It is showing up, and it's just like I said. This was a team that had high aspirations. They've fallen short of that, and I do agree with what you're saying about Oklahoma State. But at the end of the day, you barely squeak out a win against what is a bad Cowboys football team, and now you have to come into Salt Lake City and beat a Utah team that. They're 35 points per game, the margin of victory that Utah averages right now on games on the season. It's the best in the country. So can Kansas State make this game? Yes, there's a world where they absolutely cover that 16.5 point spread, but I do feel good about Utah going to this one, and I'm excited to continue to talk about this matchup and break it down as we continue to keep things rolling on Locked On Utes. But that is going to do it for our show today. Make sure you guys give Bryan a follow at Brown Bear SLC on X. Bryan, you're the man. Thanks for making the time to join me, my friend.
Thanks for letting me come on and talk football, JT. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother. That's going to do it for our show. We'll be back tomorrow talking about the latest CFP rankings, and we'll see if the Utah Utes remain in the same spot.